People don't, we want to be have all kinds of ways, and some of y'all I'm sure are going to be watching this afterwards, but this is a special month, and that we've been doing a book club for, I don't know, a year or two now, and in fact several folks, we've done Jemar's books, we've done several different books throughout the year that we're reading together. But then we decided, after Britney had written a children's book, and then we saw Jemar's youth edition of his book, and Reverend Michael had written a children's book, and then I got Brandon's writing books quicker than I can endorse them. He got me a youth edition, a teen devotion book, and so it was like, this is happening, like let's do a entire evening around resources for youth and children, and that's a pretty broad span. But I think all of us are very aware that there's really a discipleship crisis in the church, and there's a generational divide. I mean, there's a lot of people that are deconstructing things that a new generation isn't even really constructing, so we want to have a great positive conversation on some of the things that people are doing to build a spiritual foundation and create some good books for young people. There's a lot of, like, some of our musicians that are a part of the Red Letter Collective are writing songs that are geared to youth and children. So Dave Lamott was one of the first children book. I don't know if y'all seen that one. It's called White Flower, and it's based on a true story in Tennessee when there was a white power rally, right? And these young people decided to like upstage it. And so they had a wife power, and they came in bridal gowns and, had a wife power rally. And they were like, oh, wait, we missed the memo. It's white flower. And so they started throwing flour everywhere. And this is his children's book, right? And he says, oh, no, it's not flour like you cook with. It's white flowers. So then they brought flowers and they handed them off to all the white supremacists. And that's his children book, based on a true story. So there's like all kinds of books that I'm sure have inspired you as you are a kid, or as you're raising your kids. And I thought it would be fun, some of us that are in the chat here or on the Facebook, put some of the books that you are enjoying or that you want everybody to know about in the chat, so that we can start to kind of compile this. I was even thinking at Red Letter Christians, maybe we need to have a whole piece of our website that's resources for young people. So let's do it, y'all. So as we get going here, I'm going to introduce our guests, but I'm just kind of letting everybody trickle in and get on. We're only 3 minutes in here. So I know I look a little crazy because I've had this commitment to like work out. For every hour that I'm on Zoom, Jemar, I'm making myself do push-ups and sit-ups or work out. So I'm this combination of like starry-eyed Zoom and like hyper, because I just did my workout that I'm my penance workout. But thank y'all for joining us. And we're going to keep everybody muted just for a bit, because I really want us to hear from, we've got 4 different guests, and the conversation tonight, we're going to hear about each of these resources, but I also want I'm going to have each of you to introduce yourselves, because I don't like it when people give this whole big old long spiel, and then I want you to tell each of you a little bit about yourself, and also what compelled you to really do your recent work around children and youth resources. Now, I'll start with you, Reverend Michael. So Reverend Michael Waters down in Texas, incredible prophetic pastor, great guy, and been a regular at RLC. So we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Jemar.
Good evening, friends. It is a delight to be with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Again, my name is Mike Waters, and I am married to the wonderful, beautiful, effervescent Ulysses, and we are blessed with 4 children. And as we have co-labored in parenting during these very tumultuous times, our oldest is 15, our youngest is 1 year old. We sought resources ourselves that spoke to their experiences. You have to really think about what it means to be a young person today, and the things that they have seen over the course of their short lifespan. They've seen everything from insurrections to Black bodies crushed to the earth on Facebook and on Twitter. They have seen the reemergence of very outward forms of white supremacy. They have seen tragic school shootings really in the public square. They have seen war. And we can go on and on about what they've experienced. Not just, those far-reaching things, but this is the age of cyberbullying. And so they have experienced or bear witness to bullying on another level. And so I think being a part of the role of parenting in this age, you begin looking for resources that will uplift and empower and encourage your children. And if you don't find them, then you are compelled to create them, create the resources that you would have hoped would have been available. And so the children's books that I have been blessed to publish, and the others I've written and hopefully will publish in the near future, have really been born out of our experience. It's our experience in the world, our experience being parents, our experience with our children that has compelled us to write the books that we've written.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. We're going to hear more about each of these too. We got a whole hour together here, y'all. So I'm going to go to Jemar next. Jemar's written the Color Compromise, How to Fight Racism, and a bunch of other stuff, great articles and all kinds of good work. But particularly for tonight, he's got this new youth edition. So bring it on, man. Yeah, good to see you.
Greetings. Shane, it's always a pleasure to see you through the screen. I love your energy and your spirit, brother, and the team around you. Thank you so much, Britney, and everybody from the RLC team helping out on this evening. My name is Dr. Jemar Tisby. I'm a historian, I'm a speaker, I'm an author. And what a lot of people don't know, because I don't talk about it a ton, but it's been hugely impactful in my life, is that my first career was as an educator. So after I graduated college, I became a 6th grade science and social studies teacher in the Mississippi Delta on the Arkansas side. That was supposed to be a 2-year stint. It's now almost 20 years later, and I'm still here. God's plan, not mine, but here we are. And in addition to being a 6th grade teacher, I also became a middle school principal, grades 5 through 8. I also served on school boards. So about a decade of experience in various sectors of the classroom. And 2 things sort of stuck out to me from that experience. Number one, young people have this incredible energy and creativity, as well as this very acute sense of fairness and right and wrong. And so when it comes to issues of injustice of all kinds, but especially along racial lines, they actually know more than we probably give them credit for. And I really wanted to be part of a generation of adults that was equipping young people to, I think, fundamentally have agency is what I'm trying to convey in this Young Readers Edition, which is ideal for young people ages 8 and up. The other thing that stuck out to me, and I'm sure we'll get into this in the conversation, is in contrast to the people who are screaming that the sky is falling because of critical race theory in classrooms, most of the teachers I worked with and trained as a principal knew very little about race and justice and history. And so the challenge, the uphill challenge, was to equip them with the basics. And it was a far cry from anyone walking into the classroom and talking about anything resembling critical race theory. So hopefully all of our books collectively can help move the needle in the direction of justice in these matters. Love it, dude. Love it.
So our next guest, that's kind of our special guest tonight, is Brandan Robertson, who's been a part of Red Letter Christians for a long time, and recently profiled in the Rolling Stone, I think it was, wasn't it? As the TikTok pastor. He's given, he's just a great pastor and teacher, and but now is also an author of this wonderful teen devotional. So go ahead, brother, bring it.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. And Yeah, really. I mean, I am a pastor, but I began my career like so many do in kind of youth ministry and youth spaces. And really, it's been the past 2 years that I've stumbled into this world of TikTok, and I've been creating theological, spiritual content, and a lot of it's been engaged with by young people. And it was that experience of young people who were coming to me with their questions and who were really reminding me that there was a lot of stuff that I learned as a young person growing up in church that honestly wasn't very helpful, and that I had to unlearn and relearn a new way of seeing later on in my faith journey. I felt really compelled to want to write a devotional, something accessible that could help get young people, particularly young teen boys, thinking differently about faith in a more open way, in a way that was more focused on justice, kind of in line with the whole red letter Christian vision. My understanding is we want our faith to be based about Jesus and help point people to look like and live like Jesus. And so this devotional is meant to really push aside a lot of the kind of ethereal theological things that teenagers might get caught up in their church experience as young people, and instead point them to what does it mean to concretely live out this faith, to love your neighbor as yourself. What does it look like to ask questions and embrace doubts, and all these things that I found so helpful, that I've been seeing folks resonate with on TikTok, and that I hope will be helpful to others who access this devotional. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here again, and thanks for having me.
Awesome. Great. And we're going to, like I said, we're going to hear more from each of these folks. I mean, that's what it's all about. But we also did not just want to talk about children's books and resources, but we thought, let's have a little experience. So this is your heads up that you got just a minute or two. I mean, we tried to tell you ahead of time. You can invite your kids, your young people. It's just going to take a few minutes for Britney to read her book, which you may have seen this little viral picture. You can't really see it. If I was a little bit more prepared, I would share my screen, but that's Chance the Rapper reading Britney's book, The Boy with Big, Big Feelings, which we're going to read tonight. So if you've got a second to get your kids to the screen here, awesome. Otherwise, you can, this is being recorded. You can watch it. I hope there's no copyright problems, Britt, with this, but where you can do a little screen grab and play it for your class or whatever. But Britney, while people are maybe getting their kids around the screen, say a little bit about yourself and the book. I mean, Britney's been on staff with RLC for a couple of years, but you've been writing these new children's books. So talk a little bit about that and the book that we're going to hear, and then have at it. And we'll listen to you read the book to us. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. Thank you, everybody. I'm so honored to be here. And I am an author, former editor for Red Letter Christians, and in the process right now of becoming a pastor in the United Methodist Church. And that picture of Chance the Rapper reading my book, I have peaked. There's nowhere else to go from here. So that, and that's at his breakfast and books, the recreation of the Panthers breakfast. So super honored both to have that, but also the context that it's in. So I write books for all ages, but specifically I have 2 kids books out right now. Got The Boy with Big, Big Feelings and The Girl with Big, Big Questions. And I'm excited to share that it will be followed next year to round out the series with The Kid with Big, Big Ideas. And these books have really been about deconstructing and expanding the gender binary and celebrating the pieces of our kids and our kids at heart that God has made and that deserve to be celebrated and integrated, but often get suppressed with our dualistic culture. So we're celebrating emotions, deep emotions in our young boys, and loud questions and curiosity in our girls, and big and shared dreams among our non-binary kiddos. So I did not set out to write children's books. I have a 6-year-old who just has a big, tender heart. And I found that he was being told pretty often to, don't cry, brush it off. You're fine. You're fine. And I just wanted to make some space for him not to be fine, and for him to not only know that his feelings are valid, but also that they are used for connection. So I wrote a kid's poem, and it's a long longer story, but I read it at a pop-up poetry reading when I was snowed in at the Grand Rapids airport, and a acquisitions editor just happened to be there, and it's been the most wonderful adventure of one of the most wonderful adventures of my life. So I am going to read the very first one that I've got, The Boy with Big, Big Feelings. So if you've got kids out there, if you want to snuggle up, this can be your bedtime reading for tonight. The Boy with Big, Big Feelings, published by Beaming Books, illustrated by Jacob Suva. There once was a boy with feathery hair and a heart that was bursting with feeling. His emotions seemed bigger than everyone else's, and sometimes they made him go reeling. While playing outside on the yellowest days, a loud truck might rumble on by, and wouldn't you know it, that big heart of his would push feelings right out of his eyes. At night, when the shadows would form on the walls and fear would steal all of his rest, those feelings of his made it so hard to breathe as they jumped up and down on his chest. Sometimes when his play had to come to an end, or when things didn't go as he planned, the feelings would run down the length of his arms and clench when they got to his hands. This is the page we've experienced a lot over the pandemic. He felt happy feelings as big as the others, from tickles and hide and go seek, and jokes and races and stories and songs that made feelings glow from his cheeks. Beautiful things would stick in his brain and not leave him for hours and hours. The fur of a dog, a fluffy white cloud, his mama, a banjo, some flowers. But when someone he loved had a very hard day, he'd feel he'd been over-equipped to feel all their feelings as deeply as they, which would quiver right out of his lip. He wondered, why me? Why this big giant heart in a world that's so heavy and kind, where all of the feelings that are under the sun feel as if they were made to be mine? So the boy tried to stuff all his feelings deep down to control what he thought he should hide, afraid that the others would make fun of him if they saw all he felt deep inside. Would they think he was weak, dramatic, afraid? Would they call him a wimp or a baby? If they saw the big thumping heart in his chest, would they not want to play with him, maybe? But while swinging one day, feeling oh so alone, he noticed a girl feeling blue. He marveled, what's that? Could it be? Yes, indeed, her emotions were extra big too. Are you okay? The boy asked the girl. I'm fine, just sometimes I get sad. He said, you do? Hey, I get sad too. I get scared and silly and mad. The two became pals who shared their big hearts, not feeling they had to pretend when they needed to cry or laugh big and loud, since feelings had helped make them friends. And soon they noticed there were other big hearts in the classroom, the playground, the bus, and they smiled as they learned that it wasn't just them. Big emotions affect all of us. The boy and his friends slowly felt less alone with the feelings that lived deep inside them. Emotions might feel big and scary sometimes, but that is no reason to hide them. The end.
Yay, that was awesome. Thank you, Britt. Thank you, Brittany. That was Britney Winn Lee in her book, The Boy with Big, Big Feelings. And wow, that felt really good. I think I might need to do that more often. I don't have any, Katie and I don't have any kids, but we've been spending a lot of time hanging out with our nephews and nieces down here. And they really are asking some amazing questions. Like my my niece they're in the Southern Baptist Church, so she was asking a lot of questions about why there aren't women pastors there and things. And but I think as we were listening to you read that, it seems like there's, when we think of what's going on in the world, there's a lot of people that are trying to form and shape the imaginations and the minds of young people, right? And if we aren't a part of that as a church or as a big family, then Fox News and other folks, they're trying to also disciple people in a way. And Jemar, I want each of you to feel free to respond, but I want you to start us off with kind of how can people use your book, and how can we do a better job at engaging people of all ages, in some of these big questions?
Thank you so much. That was fantastic, Brittany. I need to be
great.
read children's books far more often as an adult. I am convinced of that. So my book, I think what's going to be really helpful is a quarter of the book is devoted to U.S. racial history. And so this is precisely the content that has come under attack by the forces of regression in our society. They don't want to talk about what really happened. And I'm so frustrated because it's all under the guise of saying all white people are automatically racist, or I don't want my child to feel uncomfortable, which is, again, a very white-centered way of viewing this thing, because we aren't thinking about Black kids and Indigenous kids and other people of color and the discomfort we've long felt in classrooms, either by not talking about the history at all or talking about it in a very unhelpful way. So I think what folks can use this book for is to help lay the groundwork about why we got here in terms of this racial landscape and how we got here. But then beyond that, it's really focused on the practical. So it's called How to Fight Racism. And so it gives useful, I think, actionable examples of what kids can do in an age-appropriate way to work toward justice. Everything from running for student government to get a taste of what it is like to help make rules and policies, to intentionally branching out of your own friend group and being in relationship with people who are different. So it's a very practical book. You can walk away and actually do something about the things that so many of us are frustrated about.
Yeah. And Reverend Mike, you've talked a little bit about, I've heard you talk about how your work was personal. This came out of your own love for your kids, but also beyond your kids, realizing that there's this need there. So tell us a little bit more about how this was born in you, and also like some other resources, ways that we can do better, I think across different racial, I think there's challenges in the white community and there's challenges in every community, right? But talk a little bit about how we can, do a better job at speaking truth and love to our young people.
Absolutely. Well, let me share with you my first children's book. And, I never aspired to be a children's book author. That was not anything that was on the radar. It just happened. But I am so grateful that it did happen. The first book was entitled For Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World, and was very honored that Essence Magazine named it among their 6 must-read books about race for your children. And it won the inaugural Children's Book Council's Youth Book Prize in Social Justice. And it really follows my son Jeremiah as a protagonist in the book, as he's asking questions about some of the things that are happening in the world, from police brutality to gun violence to racial violence. The book that just came out a couple of months ago is Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip, which is an introduction into the history of the civil rights movement that really has shaped our nation and continues to shape our nation in some incredible ways. And so, both of those texts were written. Liberty is our youngest daughter, really through their eyes and through their experience, which is transformational for you as a parent. I feel that I was transformed by the way in which they engage the world, by the questions that they ask about why things are the way they are, and came to the realization that other children and other parents were wrestling with these similar issues. When For Beautiful Black Boys came out, it came out right as the verdict was coming forth with Breonna Taylor's murderers. And for the first time, parents were telling me that they had a resource that they could pull down from the shelf and help their children as they were wrestling with the question of police brutality in that very intimate way. In this time of critical race theory, hysteria, right? And I think Texas, in many ways, is a poster child for that hysteria, where I will tell you that it's illegal now in our state to teach that the Ku Klux Klan was morally wrong. It is imperative that we find ways to teach our children of this dynamic history of the American Civil Rights Movement. And that's what this book is compelled to do. I would also say that the For Beautiful Black Boys, supported by the Muhammad Ali Center. Very grateful for Lonnie Ali, who is the widow of Muhammad Ali. When she read an early manuscript, she wanted the entire center to get behind it. And so their educational department put together a discussion guide and activity guide in the back of the book. And so I've been very elated to see how the book has been used in the classroom context, as well as the living room, to help young people as they wrestle with these concerns. You asked a very poignant question, though, about how all of this, if I heard it correctly, relates to a broader context of people, particularly white people. And I've always said is that we won't be free until the white living room is free. Until there's liberty in the white living room, freedom from hate, when you are behind closed doors in that very intimate space, once that space is liberated, then we will all together experience the liberty of seeing each other as created in the very image of God. And so these books penetrate the living room space, those intimate spaces where we're having those very important conversations with those budding and sometimes impressionable minds. And what's been a great joy for me, and it continues to be a great joy for me, is the number of white parents who are sending photographs of reading these texts with their children, that this is now their child's favorite book, right? Little white girls and white boys who are drawn to a book called For Beautiful Black Boys, little white girls and white boys who are drawn to a book that explores in some very accessible and yet truth-telling ways the history of the Civil Rights Movement and points to the work we must do today. And so again, I never aspired to be a children's book author. I've got 2 others that are before publishers now. And the hope is that we'll continue to penetrate these spaces and create opportunities for these conversations that will ultimately bring about transformation in our world.
I love it, man. I love it. Woo! Bringing the fire. And y'all, I mean, this is so important. I was talking to a group of folks that were predominantly white not too long ago, Michael. And I said, we need to just do an audit, a personal audit of the books on our shelves, the music we're listening to, the theologians that come to mind, and think, how many are they as diverse as the kingdom of God, or is our imagination kind of colonized by the way that we've the people that we've listened to? How many books by women of color? How many, and so it's not just about children's books that have characters that look like them, right? But that even the message, the questions they raise are coming from different social locations, right? And Brandan, you've been, I want to come to you because the thing that when I was reading your teen devotional, one of the things that occurred to me is that, it was just so practical. It's so real. It feels like it's going to be really useful for a lot of young people, but it's also empowering. It's not talking down like I kind of think that sometimes we look at young people as if they need all this nurturing, which, I mean, we all need formation. But the fact is, like, we got to remember that a lot of the movements that have changed the world have been young people. I mean, the sweet Lord Jesus died when he was 33 years old. The whole movement was a youth movement. Dr. King died when he was 39 or something, right? I mean, like the Black Lives Matter movement has been a youth movement, the environmental crisis movement, the Arab Spring, like so many of these movements around the world are youth movements. So in a lot of ways, I think that the church is in danger of losing young people, not because we've made the gospel too hard, but because we've made it too easy. We're giving them a doctrinal statement and they want a revolution. They want to change the world, right? And so I kind of heard that as I was reading your book, like it offers some really practical stuff, but you're also like, it's not patronizing, you're not talking down to folks. You're really looking to them to be the next, to be this presence of love and goodness in the world. So say a little bit more about your book, man. And, but also like, I feel like you've got a good pulse on things. So just tell me a little bit about, what you're seeing happen.
I just think everything you just said is exactly what I feel. And what's been echoed on this call so far is, again, it was really my experience on TikTok. I'll keep coming back to that because initially I just got on this app and started talking about the things that were important to me as a 29-year-old Christian pastor. And what I found was that what was important to me as a 29-year-old was also important to the 14, 16-year-old who was engaging in the comments. And that really got my mind thinking about, well, how much of my faith did I have to end up reconstructing? How much of my faith did I have to really relearn over the past decade of my life that I was taught as a young person in the church that didn't address the realities of the world that I was living in, that perpetuated messages about who I was supposed to be as a boy and gender identity, and that didn't talk about things like racism and white supremacy, that didn't talk about the economic disparities that exist in our world. These are things that this new generation that's coming up, but I also think every generation of young people have been aware of. But because we've been talked down to, because the faith has been reduced to a series of doctrinal statements that you believe in order to get to a place when you die, that's what people think Christianity is. And these young people then go off to college and are faced with the realities of the world and realize that that faith has not very much to offer them. And I think that's why a lot of folks end up walking away from faith as young people, because the Christianity that they've learned isn't connected to their world at all. It doesn't really have any answers to the problems that they're facing as individuals and that we're facing collectively. And so in this devotion, I mean, it was strange because I had written a men's devotional, which was something I never thought I would do the year before. And the publisher came back and said, well, can you take all of that content and make it accessible for young people? And what I struggled with was actually changing the content at all, because the same thing that I was trying to teach people my age in their late 20s, early 30s in the men's devotional is the same lessons that I think young people needed to hear. And I'm just so grateful for this kind of movement that's happening, where everything from the books that we've heard about so far, we're dealing with the big issues that are happening in our world, and our kids are connected to the media, and they're connected in a way that I was never, even as a millennial, and they're aware of the problems happening in the world. And I think it's important that they know that we can have these conversations with them, but also that our faith has some resources to help us think about these things and help empower us to do something about the brokenness of the world around us. So I think that's what I was trying to do in this devotional, and it's what I try to do on TikTok and other places where I'm getting to engage with young people in real time. And it's been really fruitful and encouraging to see how many people are willing to engage deeply.
Awesome. Thanks, man. And when's your book? Is it already out? I wasn't sure exactly when it released.
Next week, Filled to be Empty, the Path to Liberation for Privileged People coming out. So
awesome. Yeah. Thanks for doing it. Awesome. Britney, I want to circle back to you and see, you've part of what we have done at Red Letter Christians is try to not just protest, but protestify, as we say, not just deconstruct, but reconstruct, like, and to provide some real, I think half the word Protestant is protest. So we're pretty good at reacting. I mean, that's our whole history, right? But it's actually kind of building something new for folks is what we're trying to do tonight, what we're talking about. And so what are some other places that you're seeing hope and, navigating that tension between deconstruct? I kind of think of it like the houses we're fixing up in Philly. There needs to be some deconstruction sometimes so that we can build back, but you don't need to tear every house down. Like sometimes they just need a little bit of sheetrock and stuff, so talk a little bit about that, like how you are, where you're seeing hope, and also how you're navigating the deconstruction stuff.
Yeah, I think with like at Red Letter Christians, we say a lot, and you say this a lot, Shane, that we are building a new world in the shell of the old, and we're not just looking around and saying, "Hey, this is a shell. This is temporary. This is I can criticize this. I can pick this apart," but we're actually actively trying to build something and in its place or alongside it, or building bridges. And I think that that we have a lot of people who are walking away from faith institutions and faith communities and carrying their trauma and disappointment with them. And they would stay in those spaces were it not for their kids. Because I think, I talk to so many people who go, I'd be okay, but my kids, like I want my kids to have a foundation. And so I think that our kids are a signpost that, like, hey, I'm calling you back home, but I don't want to go back to where we've been. What can we build that's new? And so I think that's the first thing, is that's this, like, the message I keep hearing echoed over and over again. What about the kids? What are we building for them? And I'll tell you that I took all 3 of these books with me. See, I have them. I'll be your personal commercial. But I took them with me on a flight to Ohio this week, and I got so much hope from reading through everything. And I mean, from Jemar, I sent like a screenshot to like 6 different youth directors, and I was like, start here. This is, I love that you pointed out how to fight racism, because this is a how-to book. And I love that, like, flat in the middle, it's for anyone who's not read it, it's broken into 3 parts, and we've got awareness, relationships, and commitment. And I read through, let's see, I started with Ruby's fight, because Miss Ruby is from my home state of Louisiana. And so I just think that it being centralized around relationships, and you're not going to read through this and not walk away without a next step. So thank you for that. I'm sure your ears were burning. I was spreading the news, and because I just got home, I haven't read this to my son yet, but I'm excited to do it tonight. And I wanted to tell you, Reverend Michael, that it is so hard to, especially for this age group, to get to the meat of it, and it not, and to somehow strike the balance between totally glossing over what needs to be talked about and not, giving too much to our kids. And what I love about this is that you're striking the balance in a way that is still so powerful. And at the end, there is this whole learning section, more about places and people from Liberty's travels. And it can take you deeper as kids are ready for it or curious about it, as parents maybe don't know all of the stories. And so I love that. And then Brandan, I picked this up, and it took me straight back, like the format of everything took me straight back to my youth, like my evangelical fundamentalist youth days. But it made me so proud to flip through it and go, we are giving people something different. And I was expecting, not expecting this from you, because I know you and I know your content and heart, but with devotionals for teenagers, we just expect it to center around sex, right? And purity. And this is a holistic resource for holistic beings. And I'm just really I also sent this to a bunch of youth directors, and I was like, this is for a whole person in the world right now. So anyways, I know that your question was about finding hope in other places, but I'm just going to stick with these 3 books are giving me hope right now.
It's so good. That's so great. I want to give you all the Michael and Brandon and Jemar a chance to respond or share anything else that in response to what each of you have shared. If you have any other thoughts on where you see hope, or how we navigate this balance between kind of tearing down the stuff that needs to be torn down, but building up something new, because I'm finding like a lot of the young people I know, they didn't grow up with the flannel boards in Sunday school. And they're I guess there's a lot of people that are answering questions that they're not even asking. Right. And most of the young people I know, they're not looking for people to give them answers. They're looking for people to ask the right questions with, and there's actually a suspicion about people that have all the answers, right? Because the answers don't seem to be working real well right now, right? So Jemar, you got thoughts on that? Because I feel like you do a really great job of that in your work, like kind of challenging the way that we've shaped the narrative, but like telling a better story too, right?
Yeah.
Telling a true story. Yeah.
I always got thoughts, whether they're good. That's the debatable part. So Dr. King said there can be no deep disappointment where there's not also deep love. And so from that basis, he critiqued racism in the church, militarism, classism, and economic injustice. And that's the same spirit in which I try to do my work as well. And I want to be careful in these conversations, like more broadly, what I always tell people is let's not cede too much ground to white supremacy and look at Christianity wholesale as the white man's religion, as has often been the charge. Now, there's obviously some very real truth to that, particularly in the US context. But one of the places I find hope is looking at communities of marginalized and oppressed Christians and how they maintain the faith and how their faith motivated them toward action. And so in particular, the Black church tradition, which, it should go without saying that it's flawed because it's filled with flawed people. But at the same time, it is a tradition that arose in direct opposition to racism and white supremacy. And so if we want to know how to maintain faith in the face of these bitter wrongs that are happening in society, then the historic Black church tradition has a lot to offer us in terms of how do you deconstruct and reconstruct? How do you critique and create? That's what we've always had to do. And so it's actually, again, a very white-centered way of viewing it if people think that all we're doing when we talk about injustice is deconstructing, because what they probably haven't done is look at any other tradition globally of people of faith who haven't been in positions of power and how they understood Jesus and religion. So I think we need to sort of widen our view to understand what this looks like beyond just sort of a North American white evangelical context.
Yeah, it's a good word. And Michael, I want to hear what you're thinking on this, because I'm flashing back to, actually, this was a youth of, it was from the youth ministry part of Yale, I think, that Nichelle Goodry and I were up there, and she gave this talk. It was unbelievable. I mean, she always brings the fire, right? But she gave this talk about, and it was actually from the Black church context. And she was kind of critiquing some of her own tradition. And it ended by saying, if the church can't figure this out, then we're going to Wakanda. And it was just an unbelievable sermon. I don't want to botch it up, but yeah. But I think no matter where we're coming from, like, young people are tiring of a church that isn't engaging the brokenness of the world that we're living in, right? And I think you see both the good and the bad really well. I mean, you're with a lot of young people that are very engaged out of their faith in the movement for racial justice and everything else. But you want to jump in here on that and see like how you see, you know, the pulse of things right now?
Absolutely. My children were very inspired to watch the latest Matrix. And that required us to go back and watch the previous ones. And we did so as a family. And it'd been a while since I had engaged the Matrix. I think an aspect of that story is, are you asleep? Or are you awakened to the realities that are around you? Are you ensnarled by mythology? Or do you have a clarity of sight to see what's really present? I think what people have been talking about in America today in terms of a racial reckoning is actually a reckoning between what is truth and what's mythology.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the shaking of the ground underneath our feet. You know, there in Philadelphia, which I've had the privilege of being present at a few times, Shane, I always find it fascinating that the same road that the Declaration of Independence was written with those very powerful words of being created in the image of God, right? These inalienable rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, the very same road upon which that brilliant proclamation was penned, just a few blocks down, you had enslaved people being marched to the market. If that's not the mythology of the American enterprise, I don't know what is. The same road, right from the Delaware River, on the same road. I would even suggest that as it was being penned, you could hear the chains clinging down the street. These are authentic bonds from South Carolina. On them, if you read it, it says strong, healthy African Negroes, lot number 32. These are the property of W.W. Wilbur, slave seller in 1806. I think it's imperative that we hear these chains wrestling before us because it gives us a new vision of who we really are and of the work it has taken for us to be who we are today, as imperfect as we are. And it also points us to the future for the work we must still engage in. I'll say this, you know, I think the greatest force for evil in the global society, this is my opinion, is white Jesus. I don't think anything has been more destructive, damning, and damaging, not only to the body, but to the soul, than to ascribe whiteness to the Christ. And I appreciate Dr. King's considerations because Dr. King provided this wonderful balance where he recognized the harm wasn't solely to the Black community, but also to the white minds that held allegiance to this sense of whiteness. I had the opportunity to share a panel with the great Ruby Sales. We were sharing together in a panel. And Ruby Sales, I was focused, and you know my work, Shane, I focus a lot on the bodies. I think that incarnational work is so important towards liberation. So I focus on the bodies that were failed, but there's a spirituality that Ruby Sales brought there. And she talked about the liberation of the white spirit and the white soul. To see that it's not just Black bodies and souls crushed to the earth, but in fact, it's all of us and the harm that has come because of this mythology that we have paraded as truth. And so we've had to deconstruct. We've had to pull everything down. And that's what's happening in this season, right? Pull down the myth of the Confederacy, pull down the myth of American exceptionalism, pulling down so that we can build something much stronger. You know, I'll say this in conclusion, you know, Jesus, after Peter spoke up and said, "You are the Messiah, you are the Son of God. Upon this rock, Peter, this Petra, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. Upon truth, I will build the church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. We've got to build a clearer and firmer foundation for the future. And I think that's what young people are recognizing. They're recognizing that we've built our faith on faulty ground. And now it's time to revolutionize the ground, to build it on truth so we can have something far better.
Glory! I got my chill bumps on that one. Woo! Yeah. That's a good word, my brother. That's a good word. You know, and as you were sharing those the chains every time, and we've been on a couple of calls, and you've brought different. You've got this kind of collection of historic objects that tell history, and I don't know what you're doing with those, but other, you know, every time you share them, what it does for me is that we live in such a flat world with all these Zoom calls and, all kinds of virtual stuff, but that's so real, and you've got all of these items that it feels like every time we're on a Zoom call, you're bringing a new object lesson out. I think we got to keep doing that, man. Are you doing stuff with that regularly though? Like is there a way? Because I think that's part of how you're telling history. It's like when you were in elementary school and you had show and tell. Only this is truth telling, right? And it's hard history. But are you doing other stuff with that, or is it just natural? You just bring stuff everywhere you go.
Well, they got several things going. One, for over a year now, I've had a special class called Race in America. And I've had the privilege of sharing that course with corporations, with colleges and universities, with churches, as they've reached out and wanted to delve deeper into the racial histories of our nation. So again, we can arrive at a point of liberty. And I think that these relics and these artifacts just make the history more real. For nearly 20 years now, I've led civil rights pilgrimages to the Deep South, the cities and sites significant to the civil rights movement, and recently was named the vice chair of Foot Soldiers Park and Educational Center in Selma, Alabama. And so this is very much so a part of the work in which I'm engaged. And most recently was honored to be named an Emerson Collective Fellow. And over the course of next year, we'll continue to do studies in terms of strengthening democracy through storytelling. And I don't know of a greater way to tell the story than to make it real. I'll share with you one more very quickly. This is from the 1960s in South Carolina. You see KKK inscribed upon this tattered flag. This is a recent acquisition that I've added to the collection. And so we've got to understand that Christian nationalism, white Christian nationalism, runs deep. The rivers run deep in our nation, right? And again, we can't be liberated from it. We can't rightly address it until we understand that there were those who dared to fly their flag inscribed with the words of the Klan. White supremacy comes with the body count. And until we can name the bodies, locate where they are, we can't be set free.
Wow. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Wow, this hour flew by, y'all. It's been powerful. And, I didn't want us to script it too much. We're all I really am just so grateful for friends like these and for the work that each of you are doing on the creating resources for people of all ages. I mean, all y'all are writing stuff for adults too, but these resources for youth and for children, for kids' books, and it's incredible. So I think this is what I'm going to commit to, is we're going to try to keep compiling a beautiful resource list at RLC for not just books, but resources, videos, things that we can start building a positive library of resources for young people. I want to give all y'all, I always like to, when you're on these panels, sometimes you have something in you that didn't get to come out. And so I want to make sure each of you have the last word. But first, make sure people know how to follow you on socials and how to use your resources. I mean, if you've got like a study guide or a website that schools or Sunday schools, classrooms, youth groups can use your resources, especially around youth, let us know. So Brandan, why don't we start with you, buddy? And then I'll go to each of you with that question of just kind of how to continue to follow you and how to use your resources that you've created in their context. So thanks, Brandan, for being here, buddy.
No, this has been amazing. Thank you for having me, and thanks for everybody who shared. I learned so much and feel so encouraged. And so, yeah, I think the easy way, if folks want to follow along, BrandanRobertson.com. I have my social media, all the books over there. And let's just keep pointing the next generation to the radical renegade rabbi from Nazareth, who is teaching a new way of seeing and being in the world that often I think has been covered up by Christianity. And so that's what I'm taking away from tonight. And again, just so grateful to be here.
Glory. Thank you, buddy. And you can tell that you're younger than I am by you're very active on the TikTok among all. I don't know, Jemar, if you're on TikTok, but I am not, and I'm
Not
ready
like Brandan.
ready to learn. But awesome. So tell us how folks can use your stuff, man. Jemar.
Sure. You can follow me on the socials at Jemar Tisby, and I write frequently at my newsletter, jemartisby.substack.com. You can subscribe for free. Also have a website, jemartisby.com. And the last thing about the book that I'll say is I think the real value beyond the specific suggestions is what Britney mentioned. It's called the Arc of Racial Justice, and it's a framework for understanding and applying racial justice. And it stands for awareness, relationships, commitment. And just like the legs of a stool, we need all three to have a stable foundation to build our racial justice efforts on. So beyond a to-do list or a checklist, this actually gives us a way of thinking about and acting on racial justice.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. Reverend Michael, how can folks follow you and get, are there other ways that people can link up with your children's books and your other stuff?
Absolutely. As I say, the books are available everywhere books are sold, but we can be connected and stay connected at michaelwwaters.com. Again, it's michaelwwaters.com. You'll find me on the social media platforms that I am present. I'm not on the TikTok yet.
Yeah, you got the TikTok going for you.
But at Rev Dr. Mike Waters, Rev Dr. Mike Waters, you'll find me there. And a final word about the book, For Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World. It's recently been made into an audio book as well as a wonder book, which is a cool way to both read and hear the book read. And I'm actually the narrator, so you hear my voice on the wonder book as well as the audible. But thank you so much. It really has been a delight to be with all of you tonight.
Yeah, man, awesome. And Britney, tell folks how they can follow all that you're doing.
Yeah, before I do that, Shane, I do want to say to everyone that we did get you on Instagram this year. So we'll just do one social media platform at a time.
Yes,
you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Britney Winn Lee. And lastly, I just want to say that we can find out a lot about where God is calling us into as change agents just by listening to the questions that kids are asking. And so if we can pay attention to their curiosity, that'll give us the next step forward. So I'm really grateful to be with all of you tonight.
Awesome. Well, we're going to wrap up, and I'm so thankful for each of you as friends, but also with this particular conversation. I think it's such a needed thing. There's a lot of not great children's resources and youth resources out there. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but I think of Rich Mullins. He said, all these Christian musicians, they tell me, God gave me this song, but sometimes I listen to it and I know why God gave it away. So, but I'm so grateful for all of you for, creating these new books and resources, and we need more of them. I know there's more out there that we don't know about, so we're going to keep bringing them in. And I'm going to ask Britney to close us out in prayer in just a second, but just a heads up, y'all, what's on the horizon is we do morning prayer through Red Letter Christians on the first of each month, and Brenda Salter McNeil, Reverend Dr. Brenda Salter McNeil, dear friend and wonderful leader will be with us on February 1st at 9 a.m. Eastern time. She's getting up real early, 6 o'clock in the morning out on the West Coast. So join us for prayer on Tuesday, but every first of the month we do it. Next month, our book club will be Fortune by Lisa Sharon Harper, brand new book coming out, a friend of all ours on our board for RLC, great friend. So grab this book, and Lisa will be with me in a couple weeks to talk about it. And I think that's enough. It's been awesome. And Britney, who this was really her idea. We kind of were talking about it together and wanted to do this kind of special all ages book club together. And she's also now transitioning to really spend a lot more focus as a pastor, or what's your official title, Britt? But you're going to be taking a ministerial job in your local congregation there, working with children and youth, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, very close.
Very close. Got close. But I also, I'm so grateful for all that you put into RLC, and you're still going to be a part of it. You're just not going to be as officially on staff as you have been. So thanks for tonight, and thank you, each of you, for tonight. And Brittany's going to pray us out. So thanks, Britt.
Thank you, Shane. Please pray with me. God, our good parent who sent Jesus into the world, who reminded us to have faith like the children. Remind us now that having faith like the kiddos is not necessarily just going along with the status quo and being okay with unquestioning trust, but it is being curious, and it is not taking simple answers as the be all end all, but really wanting to know more about each other and your world and how it works and what the dream for it could be. Let us be like them. Lead us forward to make a better world for them, and be with all of those who have gathered here tonight. Thank you for the resources that are being dreamed about and put into this world so that we can walk each other home a little more as we go along. Pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen, y'all.